All right, we're going to call the January Administrative Committee meeting to order. Could we get a roll call, please?
Chair Burning,
Present.
Vice Chair Counter,
Present.
Supervisor Fiedler, Supervisor Long,
Present.
Supervisor Shirley.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. And now we will go to the approval of the minutes. Are there any additions, changes, or subtractions? We have 2 meetings worth on here from last time. So are there any additions, changes, subtractions, any additions or changes? All right, hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved. Public comment, I know we have at least one, so if you'd come up, try to limit the public comment to 3 minutes. Mr. Ben, that'd be great. If you could state your name and where you're from.
Okay.
Thank you.
Benjamin Lee Fox. I currently reside at 2529 Powell Avenue. It would be in the town of Troy, basically on the boundary of Troy and City River Falls. In 2015, I convinced my parents to buy that parcel. It's about 12 acres, knowing that it was going to have a long, arduous journey. It was in the process of having joint agreements between the town of Troy and City River Falls. I'm on the intersection of that debate. So now that 10 years later, we're looking at doing some cleaning up of the CSM, easements, and everything else. And as part of the rebuild of County Road U from, it would have been Highway 35 down to County Road M, the county purchased a few parcels and switched some easements. So what I'm looking to is that we're cleaning up our parcel, whether or not the 3-acre parcel that the county owns, and then there's I think about a half-acre parcel that the county owns. Given that none of that is now in the city or in the county's interest to own, what is the process of declaring that like surplus parcels or everything else and going to sale? So I've kind of talked to it with like transportation and everything else, but I would ask for more formal investigation into that 3-acre parcel and 5-acre parcel, given the changes of that climate of that area. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments? Are there any other public comment? Any other public comment? All right. Hearing none, we will close that portion of the agenda, move on to our business items. Business item number 1 is the financial report.
Yeah, the financial report's attached. We're still looking at the end of 2024, although there are quite a few additional entries that'll be posted over the coming months as additional revenues come in and things get cleaned up. Looking at vehicle registration and sales tax, though, those are kind of running on pace. And again, sales tax, that's just been up and down all year. We had a couple of good months there, and then it dipped down for a low month for us. Overall, though, it is running just slightly behind where we were last year, but very close, probably statistically similar to the prior year. And then the last 2 reports are KIP report and ARPA report. As you can see, a lot of the KIPs are closed out, and the ARPA report, just about everything is closed out on that one.
Are there any questions for the administrator on the financial reports? Supervisor Counter?
Just on page 6, again, just where we're at with the unallocated funds on the expenses for the general. So it's the first line item in the expenses.
You want that one, Dustin? He's going to look it up. Fund balance reallocations?
Yeah, that's mostly all fund balance allocations, and then there's a little bit of ARPA money that we spent on the
broadband.
The broadband,
Last
yes.
of the broadband grants
Yep.
was in there also.
Yep.
So those would be the two items that were in there.
Okay. Thanks. It's just without, when it's in the unallocated, I just always ask the question, so thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, we never anticipate having excess funds because we budget to zero, so it's not expected, although historically we do. And then that's where they end up, and that's why it's always a zero budget, but money gets moved.
Sure. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the administrator? Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to number 2, ordinance to repeal and recreate Chapter 3, ordinance delegating power to acquire, manage, and sell tax deeded lands of the St. Croix County Code of Ordinances. Heather?
Yes, this ordinance is being presented to you tonight as there was change in statutes recently. So Wisconsin Act 207 modified Wisconsin Statute Chapter 75 regarding how counties process properties that we take on in rem tax foreclosure. So the main changes in the statutes are how we treat unclaimed surplus proceeds. So if we take a property and then sell it, and there's excess proceeds, the county gets to first pay back any costs that we expended on taking the property. And then we have to send the funds to the former owner within 1 year. And we have to do that by sending it to the address on their last tax bill. So this modifies the previous statute that required us to hold any surplus proceeds for a period of 5 years. It amended it to only 1 year. So let's say we mail the check to the former owner, it gets returned to us, we have to hold it for a year, and then the treasurer has to process it through unclaimed funds. So that does help, obviously, for budgeting purposes, because holding monies for 5 years, how do you budget for that? So that was a good change by the legislature in modifying that unclaimed surplus funds. The new law also requires us to sell property that we acquire within 240 days of acquiring the property, and then starting in 2026, that will be reduced to 180 days. So it shortens the time frame on which we take the property, we have to turn around and sell it. This act also changes the repurchasing authority. So if a former owner is able to repurchase the property, we have to give them priority. We also put language in this ordinance that if a former owner doesn't want to repurchase it, after we publish it and bring it to the administration committee for approval, that the administration committee can give preference to adjacent property owners to purchase the property. That was discussed at previous committee meetings, so we did add that language to the ordinance. Those are the main changes. Basically, the ordinance mirrors the statute. There are some other things in there that that are new from the last ordinance. For example, yearly, the treasurer will report to the administration committee regarding all parcels that we have taken and what is going to happen with them, whether we're trying to sell them, if the county wants to keep it for parks property, but once a year, the treasurer will report on that to the administration committee. I think those are the main updates. I would just tell the committee, besides what's in this ordinance, the treasurer and the county clerk have really been working hard on creating internal procedures to reduce how many, roads we take or, small parcels that we take. We're also going to engage in a project to identify all the county-owned land and if we're actually using that county land or not, or whether it should be sold to be put back on the tax roll. So in the next year, you'll see two parcels that we took back in 1996. They're not being used anymore. So once the assessor determines what the value of those are, we'll be proceeding with selling those also. I think that is all the items regarding this ordinance.
Yeah, and maybe Denise wants to highlight some of the things that she's done to help reduce those. The new processes she's put in place have been very successful. So, and it's probably good for the public to know in case they get one of these phone calls. And plus, I like to put Denise on the spot.
So, well, they're all kind of addressed on a case-by-case situation because every piece that's kind of coming across our desk is a little bit different, has a little bit unique situation. So I've just been reaching out to our community development staff, corp counsel, county clerk, and just looking at each kind of on a case-by-case situation and trying to determine whether we can find a resolution outside of the tax deed process to have a transfer of ownership or get that that problem resolved before it comes to this point. It would save the county a lot of money and time, a lot of our resources that we put into this whole piece by multiple departments. And then there's less expense involved, which is added to that property. So if we can get the property owners to kind of get that problem resolved or ownership switched outside of coming through this process, it's really just a win-win for everybody. Yes, we've had, okay, yeah, I wasn't really thinking about that. We have a lot of tax collection going on right now, but yes, we've had several properties where we were able to contact the homeowners and they were able to get these properties switched into somebody else's name. They're on the tax roll, so they'll still be collecting a tax base before anybody here has to put a lot of time and energy into that process. And then it doesn't come to you guys for difficult decisions too, for when we have, you know, different people bidding on kind of oddball pieces. So we've had a number of properties resolved that way. I've got another one on my desk right now. And then I'm also working with community development to kind of identify some of these problem parcels as soon as they're identified by their department, rather than waiting till there's a tax assigned and they're delinquent 3 years down the road. So we're going to try to kind of hit these ahead of time, meeting with corp counsel and establish some more generalized procedures on how to address those kind of ahead of the game. So.
Yeah, some of those innovative approaches that Denise is implementing, I've talked with my administrator group, and they've been very interested exactly what we were doing to head some of this off and actually avoid going to the foreclosure process on them. So kudos to Denise in her office.
Yeah, thank you for spearheading that, because that was not a fun exercise. Like the last couple were it was a lot. And there were some tough, what's that?
There's going to be more. As they start looking at these parcels, you know, the county owns thousands of parcels. So we're going to start combing through those and finding these remnant pieces. These two that are coming up we found by accident. But we're like, why do we own pieces of the Apple River? So we're gonna clear them off the books. But it brought up the question then, maybe there's a lot more we need to clean up.
Amazing. And we voted our pay raise down, right? Just kidding. Well, actually we did, but anyway, thank you very much for all your hard work on that, because that is, once we get past this initial phase, I think it'll be much better sailing. And if other counties can follow suit, I think that's going to free up resources. So nicely done. Did you have something, Supervisor Counter? Go ahead.
I had a few things on this one, but one, I tried to read through it pretty thoroughly, and you guys, this is a well laid out document. So thanks for all your efforts that you guys have for where it's currently at. And a couple of them I think you kind of answered, because one of the things that I had concerns is, as I read it, it seemed like it was concentrating on who the current parcel holder is at the time that something happens, but sometimes people die and all of a sudden there's an executor involved or other things that happen. And the way this was stated was that it goes to whoever the last owner was, it goes to their address. And you may not necessarily find anybody in that case. So it's not something I have a solution for, but as I'm reading through it, I just have concerns over those things to make it so that we can ensure that whoever the rightful owner is going to be notified without spending a tremendous amount of money to get there. But that was a concern. Then for line 65 and 111, then we have or executor, estate executor or some, I don't know. that was just on line 19. One of the concerns I had there was if, say, a family gets notice, and according to that, you're getting a 30-day notice that they have to come up with the money to completely resolve all the issues. And if a family gets a 30-day notice right off the top, it's pretty difficult if they have to go in and get a loan to try to clear title to this and get everything in order. To get the loan, the banks are going to probably require having a appraisal and things, just, the processes that have to be gone through to get a loan. 30 days is pretty tight for most people for that case. So it's just something to think about, so that if we're trying to get this back to the right people, that we're giving them the reaction time that's necessary. So something to think about. The other concern I had was on the properties. Again, these are things I don't have an answer for, but things that they would have a remainder property that we're taking in that has a detrimental impact to natural resources, or a property that we're taking in that may be used as spite strips, or a detrimental property that specific services for public infrastructure, like we've talked when we had issues in the past where they're used for stormwater retention ponds or whatever it is, how we're dealing with those. Then the last one was maybe to add in line 121, the U.S. Fish Wildlife, so you'd add federal. I think you have state there, but whether you want, if they would be one of the exclusions.
So I'll speak to the last comment first about line 121. So that language is directly from the statute, that the previous sections do not apply to the withdrawal and sale of county forest lands, nor to the sale or exchange of lands to or between the county and municipality or the state. So I would have to research a little bit further whether or not there's any issues with adding or federal government to that section. And Denise probably has more input that she can provide you regarding the heirs and beneficiaries. Typically, when we are taking these properties for lack of payment of property taxes, the person has been deceased for quite some time, and the family just hasn't taken the necessary steps to get the property in their names. And so Denise probably looks at obituaries and different things, but she's also probably received phone calls too, because somebody's receiving the mail that's going to that house. So Denise can probably speak on the most recent situation we've had, and she's really trying to work with the heirs, but they haven't taken care of it the entire time that the person's been deceased, and then it gets to this point. They may not have the ability to do so either, but I think Denise can speak on that issue a little bit further.
Right. I think by that time, even though it's not required, we are looking at, if somebody's deceased, we've discovered that, and we're looking for heirs or anything like that. We've already reached out and tried to find those contacts before it gets to the point where we've actually taken it. And if the property's in probate or the family's working on it, we will pull it from the list. If there's a plan in place or they've reached out and made contact with us and they've got some kind of a solution in the works, we're not going to take it at that point. It's going to be put on hold for a while. So you're exactly right. That's a really tight window for somebody to come up with the money. But usually I think it's going to be unlikely in reality. We'll have to kind of see how it all plays out. But in reality, that it gets to that point where somebody repurchases it, because by the time it gets to that point, we've already contacted these people. They've had plenty of opportunity to come up with the money or make a plan. And it's likely there isn't somebody that's going to be doing that. So, yeah, we'll have to be watching those and kind of working through them case by case, but we're already doing most of that now, so.
And the reason for the short time frame is primarily because once we get to 2026, once we acquire the property, we have to post it for sale within 180 days. And so Denise and Christine and I went backwards through a calendar to see how that would line up, and that's where the 30 days came from. But Denise is right. Once we get to that point, Denise has probably already been trying to work with the heirs for quite some time. And also, to your point about contaminated property or if it's detrimental impact, we do not add those to our list. So we have a property that hasn't paid taxes for over 10 years probably. Because we know it's a contaminated property, we've been trying to work with the DNR and the town to see how that can be resolved. So we don't add it to our list to take through the in-rem tax foreclosure process unless we have a plan already in place where that contaminated property will not become the problem of the county. So we do have some ability to leave ones off the list if we think there's questionable title, if there's contamination, if we're working with the heirs. We will wait and put that on the next round of properties that we look at, just because we want to make sure that we're doing what's in the best interest of the county.
Thank you. You've answered all my questions well. I appreciate it.
Are there any, is there a motion to bring this forward?
So I would make a motion for the ordinance repealing and recreating Chapter 3, the ordinance delegating power to acquire, manage, and sell tax deeded lands of the St. Croix County Code of Ordinances.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Supervisor Long. Discussion. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, I will call the vote for the ordinance to repeal and recreate Chapter 3, ordinance delegating power to acquire, manage, and sell tax deeded lands of the St. Croix County Code of Ordinances. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. The motion is approved unanimously. Number 3, resolution adopting 2025 to 2028 library plan of services. Administrator Witt.
Yeah, a 4-year library plan of service is one of the requirements for counties to have. There's a templated version that's updated. It was sent out to all of the librarians for review, received some feedback, made those updates. So this is the final version being presented to you for approval. It doesn't say much. It just says we're going to continue to fund libraries at 100%. I mean, bottom line, that's what it says.
Is there a motion to bring this forward?
I'll move to approve the resolution adopting the 25-20 to 28 library plan of services.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Shirley. Is there any discussion? Yes, Supervisor Long.
Quick question. I'm assuming that all the heads of our libraries have reviewed this and given their blessing, so to speak?
Yeah, it was sent to all of them. I gave them a full month to review it. I laid out what the approval process would be. I thought maybe somebody might come here tonight if they had any questions or issues with it, but seeing that none of them are, I take it that it's fully endorsed. There was only one that had any corrections for me, and they were mostly just typos. Punctuation adjustments.
Supervisor Counter.
The only thing I had on this was a question regarding, as they all have their own libraries, but do they meet on a regular basis or not a regular basis, but occasional basis for, all the libraries of St. Croix County?
So I know the library directors get together on an irregular basis to meet and discuss things as the head of the libraries. So this plan does not require them to do so, though. This plan encourages that to happen, but it's not a requirement, is the way that I framed it in here.
The only reason I bring it up is because we're supposedly, the admin committee here is supposed to have oversight as part of our requirements. Would it be prudent if they do hold any types of meetings and they take any types of minutes that they would share them with the county-wide community library services meeting to the admin committee? Not necessarily to have to do a report, but just so that we can be updated, to keep abreast of what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know that the library directors meeting is something that you probably would find interest or value in. I mean, that's probably more an operational type thing. They did make just recently a library report where one of the librarians came in and sort of reported on the system. And that would be, I think, the appropriate level that we would encourage to continue to happen. So I don't know if that meets with your expectations, but I guess that was my thoughts.
Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, the chair will call the question. All those in favor of the resolution adopting the 2025 to 2028 Library Plan of Services signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That resolution is adopted unanimously. Number 4, resolution amending 2025 budget. Administrator Witt, if you'd explain what we're doing here.
Yeah, it's a budget amendment. I'll turn it over to Audrey to explain the position change. But it's a budget amendment because it's modifying the authorized FTEs. It's decreasing one position and adding one. And while they kind of have it fiscally covered for 2025, it's really an opportunity cost because they're going to use grant monies to offset this instead of spending the money on something else. So I don't want it to be lost that it does really cost the county additional money with this budget change. It's fairly minor. It's about between $4,000 and $5,000. But it is a budget amendment that would require a 2/3 vote by the county board. And if Audrey wants to explain, I guess, the position change that's happening here.
And now that he just said 2025, I realize there's 2 typos in there, that the grant funding will offset this cost of 2024 it means 2025 in both of those locations on the resolution. So my mistake on the typo there at the financial impact part. I did. So basically requesting approval for a budget amendment to reallocate 1.0 FTE from a substance use counselor to a mental health therapist. Both those positions already exist at a 7 and an 8 FTE, so we're just kind of swapping those FTE around in the behavioral health department. The request for this aligns with the behavioral health integrated care model, which prioritizes dual trained providers to improve patient care and streamline services. So instead of having to see both a SUD counselor and a mental health therapist, we have individuals that hold both licenses that could be a mental health therapist, so that those clients only need to see one provider versus seeing different providers for different reasons. So the transition is supported by a qualified treatment trainee grant for 2025, which will pretty much offset the immediate budget impact of moving this individual from a SUD counselor to a mental health therapist. But there could be some future costs, like Administrator Witt said, just because the mental health therapist is a higher graded position than the SUD counselor position. So in the future, if we were to refill that FTE, it could have a larger impact on the budget. But at the same point, mental health therapists have a higher reimbursement rate. So a lot of that extra funds that we pay out in wages is also reimbursed to us. So the change overall is meant to hopefully enhance care quality, increase revenue, and support workforce development by providing a professional development outlet for this individual that has the SUD qualification and is now able to be a mental health therapist.
Okay, is there a motion to bring this forward? Is there a motion to bring this forward?
Trying to give everybody else a chance.
Yeah. Well, if not, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution amending the 2025 budget. The second by counter. All right, with that, is there any discussion? Any discussion? Third and final call, discussion. All right, hearing none, the chair will call the question. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion is approved unanimously. Number 5, consideration of amendments to county board rules. Administrator Witt, would you like to take this, or Corporation Counsel?
So before you, there are changes or requests for changes to amendments to the county board rules. This will be the first time we'll look at it, and then I believe we'll bring it back at a future, in a resolution format. So this is just the initial changes that I recognized based on changes to operations in the last year. So the changes are set forth in the county, or in the cover memo. Removing 8:30 from the paragraph so the organizational meeting can happen at any time during that day. We did dissolve the Willow River Rehabilitation District, so I removed that from the rules. Page 23, Article 4 is probably the most predominant change. Pursuant to Wisconsin Act 2023, Act 32, statutory language now requires the county board to appoint to the Land Conservation Committee a person engaged in agricultural use. And agricultural use is defined in Chapter 91, and it is defined as any of the following activities conducted for the purpose of producing an income or livelihood, which includes crop or forage production, keeping livestock, beekeeping, nursery sod or Christmas tree production, floriculture, aquaculture, fur farming, forest management, or enrolling land in a federal agricultural commodity payment program. So those are things that are agricultural use. So this act requires that someone on the Land Conservation Committee be appointed by the county board that is engaged in agricultural use. So page 23 has modified that language.
Yeah, and this one you do have some choices on. So the way that we framed it was if one of the 5 county board supervisors on there meets that requirement, because it holds for 2 years then no additional change has to happen. One of them meets it. So I don't know if Scott or Ryan are bee farmers on the side, but they would meet it then, and that would meet it. So if they don't meet it, what we're saying then is then we would add a citizen member. So in our current scenario, none of the 5 existing supervisors that serve on community development meet this agricultural requirement. So we would have to add a citizen member then that does meet that, so that we make sure that we have an agricultural representative on the committee. So that's the way we framed it, but there are some different ways you could do it. You could say you always want a citizen appointed, even if one of the members qualified. So it's open for your discussion. We just framed it one way to start the discussion.
And maybe, Ken, if we could scroll down to that page to see that change, that might be the most helpful for the supervisors. It's on page 23, I believe.
Got all that?
There we go. So previously, this section indicated that someone from the Farm Service Agency needed to be on the Land Conservation Committee. That has now been modified to the language regarding a person engaged in agricultural use. And so right now, the way it's worded is if no supervisor assigned to Community Development Committee meets the criteria of a person engaged in agricultural use, the county board shall appoint a citizen member. And then the citizen member would be limited to voting on items specific to the responsibilities of the Land Conservation Committee, which are set forth in Wisconsin Statute 9207. We did attach sections 9206 and 9207, as those are the statutory sections that address land conservation committees and their responsibilities.
And again, a choice for you is we limited them to voting only on those items. You could technically appoint a citizen and they could vote on all the items if you wanted to allow that. So again, these are choices that you can make. I just want to make sure that you understand where the shifts could be.
And you don't have to have an answer for us tonight. You might want to think about it as we can bring this back. So this is just an initial review of this section.
Do you want to finish up all the sections and then we'll come back for questions, or
Sure.
do you want to entertain questions now?
I can it's quick. The other sections
Okay.
are just removing the County Library Planning Committee, which the county board has already done. It's just removing them from the rules. And then again, just removing the Willow River Rehabilitation District appointments because that is no longer a district.
Supervisor Fiedler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a thought as you were going through it, and going back to number 7, third line up from the bottom of that paragraph, where you provide the option to appoint a citizen member. Perhaps another option might be to appoint another county board member. That fulfills what the administrator was talking about with the 2-year appointment.
Can you name a county board member that qualifies?
Well, no, but there might be one. Yeah, Swanepoel.
Is he actively farming?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I'm just saying, you could go to a county board member who's not on that committee or to a citizen member, just an option.
Nope, that's an excellent point. Yep. So you guys come up with good ideas all the time.
Yeah, Supervisor Counter.
I had a few. On the county board members, if you did do that, is it a percentage of income that has to be acquired for that ag? Or is it just that they do it?
The statute only requires that they do it. It just says, any of the following activities conducted for the purpose of producing an income or livelihood. It doesn't say how much the income has to be. So if they produce an income, I think, $10 would cover it.
So I think currently we have kind of Dick Hesslink in that position on the community development right now. And Dick is extremely qualified and everything. The question is whether he can maintain, because his attendance hasn't been real good for us, but he's extremely qualified for the position that he's been placed in. It's just a question, I guess, that we have to bring to him if it's still something he can do or not.
Yeah, and part of it came up with his appointment authority, because he was appointed by the FSA chair originally. And he hasn't been appointed by the county board. And so we need to update our rules and then get that appointment done correctly. And whether it's Dick or it's somebody else, to make sure that we follow the new rules once we've established them.
Okay. And can I?
Yeah.
So the rules for the Board of Supervisors, one of the questions I had was if you verified if all of the district descriptions are correct or up to date. It seems like every once in a while we're changing some of that, so I was just wanted to bring that up. As I read through this, one of the other things that just wanted to look at for the future for us on the this basically is telling us how we should operate as the board. And one of the things that I have concerns on is our transparency to the public with certain items, like identifying when we are, what are our reimbursements for, and what outlines what are reimbursable things, and trying to without getting super technical with it, but to open it a little bit better so that people understand that the purpose for certain things are for the benefit of our taxpayers. So if we're going to particular classes or things that we're enhancing our ability to do a better job on this being a board member, that would be a reimbursable expense. But saying it in a manner that it makes it so that there's a better understanding of what our reimbursements are for. We've had food things and we've had this and we've had that. And I'm not saying I'm against any of this stuff, but where my concern is that Joe taxpayer looks at all this stuff, and if they're looking at you as an individual in your district and they see, well, geez, they did this and they did that and they got all this extra money. Why is this? I'm just looking that we're very transparent as to how we identify our reimbursements and how they're, for what uses.
And Supervisor Counter,
Yes.
I think Article 1, Section J is entitled Compensation Per Diem Mileage and Expense Reimbursement. And right
Yes.
now, the language indicates refer to the county's compensation per diem mileage and expense reimbursement policy. Do you think it would be beneficial to actually include the policy as an addendum to these rules? I mean, the only problem is when we update that policy on the county, we have to make sure we also make sure it's updated along with the rules. But I think previously we have just referred to it. That's why it's only updated once. But that could be one way to address your concern.
If it's addressed in the other area and it's very crystal clear, I don't have any problem with it. Then I didn't look at that particular item. I was looking more at Section H. So that, the other thing this would be kind of another policy issue, but on the back, just looking at, in there, it also gives for during the board meetings, what's expected and some of the criteria for the comment cards. And it spells out what is expected of them. And I haven't looked at our comment cards, but I'm just wondering if that would be a benefit when we print those things up, if on the back side of it, on the comment card, we had this is what the criteria is, because it's right in this document, and may help people so they better understand why it's being done the way it is. On page 21, item 2, just wanted to make sure that when it's said and done, that it kind of lines up with the new chapter 3 for the tax deed sales. You've got the statutory language and stuff, but without looking at the statutes, just that it lines up. And then on page 33, item 5, it's no longer Squaw Lake. It's got to change that one to Apple Lake. And you got my comments.
Supervisor Shirley.
To go back, actually, you're on the page already, to page 23. So what I've been told is that an FSA rep cannot serve this role due to the state statute changes. The interpretation I heard was because that would be a conflict of interest. So we might want to double check that, but that's what I've been told by others in the farming community. And personally, I mean, I wouldn't mind having a citizen member on that board. I don't know if we want to strict them down to only voting on those particular items. I wouldn't mind their input on all of them, but that's, and then page 26, if we can scroll down there for the BOA. In community development, we just finished up chapter 15. And we made some adjustments to those. So if we could make sure that that lines up with what we just changed, because we're basically making the Board of Adjustment strictly an appellate board. So if we line that up and make sure that that's the same as what we're doing in chapter 15. That's all I have.
Are there any other ideas? Yeah, Supervisor Long.
Yeah, back to that number 7, where it was. I don't know if you've considered what happens if you had a private citizen and then all of a sudden the election rolls around and now one of your supervisors qualifies. Do you keep that person on or do they automatically drop off? I kind of like the idea of having a private citizen in that role anyhow, but I don't know if you've considered that scenario.
Yeah, they're appointed to a 2-year term, so the same as the supervisors, so we would just match those terms. So it'd roll around and we'd know when the supervisors get appointed whether it'd be needed or not. And like I said, you have an option here. I'm totally fine with whatever way you want to go. If you want a citizen and you want them to vote on everything, just tell us and we can update that language to reflect whatever scenario you would like to see.
Got one other consideration, and this is an idea that has been brought to me a number of times by a number of people, so it's not my idea, but anyhow, it has to do with what we've termed as symbolic resolutions. And the idea is to incorporate into the rules the option for when a type of symbolic resolution is brought to the board, either through requests for future agenda items or some other avenue, that the board chair actually has the discretion to decide to not bring that forward if it's truly deemed a symbolic resolution. In other words, symbolic being it really has no impact or no bearing on the county or the county operations or the citizens. And then, of course, along with that would be an explanation of a justification why that resolution wouldn't be brought forward. And also the ability for the board then to have the ability to override the chair so that that type of resolution could in fact be brought to the board or sent to a committee. So, and the whole idea here is to try to avoid some of these resolutions that sometimes appear to be a distraction from what the board really needs to be focusing on. And so it's been suggested to me on a number of different occasions, and I thought it would be worth bringing up to see if we might consider that type of option. I don't know what your feelings are on that type of thing.
So I will just add to that quickly. I am 100% against anything that distracts from county business, these statements or whatever it is. I watched the county board years ago go through so many different symbolic resolutions and things put on, referenda put on ballots to drive out votes for issues that weren't pertinent to county business. And thank goodness the state legislature put a kibosh to those referenda being able to be put on ballots now. So I think that limits it, and I think it's on us as elected officials to eliminate that if at all possible, because that's not why we're here. So that's my opinion. I consider it a very humble opinion, and as a matter of fact. But anyway, so are there any other feedback for Corporation Counsel and administration regarding the rules? And if you have anything between now and the next meeting, of course, you know how to contact them via email, phone, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. No, I'm just teasing. So, all right, cool. So if there's no other comments, we're going to close that portion. Administrator Witt?
Can we get some guidance on number 7? Because I think you have a lot of options there. I'll leave it exactly the way it is right now unless you tell me to do something differently tonight. And you'll get a chance to vote on it next month. But it's going to stay exactly like this unless you change it tonight with me.
So there's been a couple of ideas really quick floated out there between a citizen member being permanently assigned, one with restricted voting rights, county board member. Personally, if we're going to put a citizen member on there, I think that citizen member shouldn't have to guess when they can vote and when they can't. So I think they should have a full purview if we do that. One of the things we need to remember, though, if we put a citizen member on this particular body, they answer to the board chair and not necessarily the electorate when it comes, to issues. So always remember that when you're putting citizen members on boards that can sway decisions on policy and ordinance. So I want to remind the committee of that when we're making our decision. I personally am not against it as long as we're giving them, if they're going to be on there, let them be on there. That's my opinion. So you two kind of had a stronger opinion on that. I think I'd what do you guys want to see? Supervisor Shirley, should I pick on you or call on you first?
Yeah, I would rather have a citizen member rather than another county board member. I mean, I wouldn't mind the outside perspective. And I would allow them to vote on everything.
And Supervisor Counter, do you have anything to add?
I would say the same. As far as, I think having the citizen member is beneficial, mainly because of their, our ability that we can draw from another knowledge base and things that can be very helpful, especially with community development. We're dealing a lot with land use, a lot with farming. There's other purviews that go beyond. We have the park systems, we have everything else that's also in that program. But I would have to think about it just a little bit on 100% voting. But the thing is that right currently anyway, the majority of the things that we're working on, having that agricultural influence helping us through it, it would be a tremendous benefit. So we've just done manure that I know that's the approval's been through, and now we're working on other water quality issues, and having that perspective of the farming operations and stuff can be very beneficial for ensuring that we're not going over the top on ordinances, ensuring that we have a better understanding of how their agribusiness works, those things. So yes, I really feel strongly that we should go that route. I just got to think about voting 100% because of some of the other fields that we work in.
Is there any other feedback from this side? And I think the only other thing is what I would consider is if we're looking at this and we're not able to fill a citizen role, can a county supervisor fill in until such applicant can come forward? Because there's time to time where maybe it's tough to fill a citizen spot sometimes. So anyway, I just thought, consider that what language would be, but anyway. Did you have something, Supervisor Long? No. Okay. All right. Excellent. With that, we are going to close this portion of the agenda and move on to number 6, consideration of department annual reports formatting. And Mr. Administrator, if you would take that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we're getting you the information you need. And so the annual reports are split up throughout the year. Each of the departments, we just evenly distributed across the year. We do have a template. This is really inherited. We've been doing it this way for at least a decade. But thought it'd be a good time to come back, review it, and make sure that these annual reports are getting you the information that you need, or if you want to see some changes, let us know.
Yeah, are there any, go ahead, Supervisor Fiedler.
I chatted briefly with the administrator before the meeting, and as I saw this part of the agenda and the template, I just thought what I would like to see. And I did have a series of things that were extremely minor that I would think might make it just a little bit better. But rather than go through all these things, because they're just, there could be lots of right answers to this, I might just suggest that I can give my suggestions to the administrator, and he can come back to us next month and just say, we're going to reach agreement in about 2 minutes, whether we think they're good or bad. But some have just added specificity to things. So I'll just, if there's no, unless somebody wants me to go through all of my thoughts on this, I'll just say I'll get with the administrator and suggest them, and he can take them as he seems fit.
No, we want to hear them. I mean, I do actually. I'm serious. I want to hear them. If you would oblige us.
Sure. Well, one thing, kind of one over the world that this doesn't address exactly, is when we hear these annual reports. So I was just suggesting to the administrator, maybe it would be good to, I know he's doing an administrator's report now that he puts together sometime early in the year for sharing with us. And that all of these annual reports from the department heads and the clerks of court and the sheriff and all the other entities that are independent of the staff of the county administrator could be asked to prepare their reports to give to him to be parts, they'd be effectively, well, let's call them annexes of his report. And his report could be more or less what it is now, with a summary of his effectively state of the county, and then maybe a quick summary of each of the departments as part of his report. And that gives us an executive summary of the county given to us by the county administrator sometime in the first 90 days of the calendar year. And that would then require all these other people I mentioned, the department heads or the independent elected officials, to get their reports in at the end of the calendar year. We just have to figure out what's a good time to get those in. And if some things can't get all the information in, you put an asterisk next to it and say basically based on information as of February 15th, this is our report, augmented later. I would combine a couple of things. I think I'd combine the mission statement and the summary of responsibilities. Most mission statements are about one sentence or two sentences, and I would, so it doesn't change anything, it just combines them. Put those in italics, put the rest in regular type. I think it just looks good. Where it says goals and objectives achieved, I put in the calendar year. So that would be like if we were to receive a report next month, that would read goals, objectives achieved in 2024. Under the department budget status, I thought the only two additions I would make there is at the end of, however we structured the table, I would add one category, and that would be budgeted tax levy. So you've got expenses, revenues, and, well, I guess you've got budgeted tax levy. I just noticed that now. Pardon? I got it added for you. Oh, okay. I was going to say, gosh, I didn't realize it was there. And then maybe a column that said variance, so that we knew that, I mean, we see a number, but we could say plus 4%, minus 3%. Then we have some idea, is it minor or is it major? Just that simple. I mean, again, the whole purpose of this was giving us a quick summary of what's happening in an area. And the same thing with goals and objectives. Instead of saying for the current year, I'd say for, in this case, 2025, as opposed to just saying for current year. Now, he says enter year, so it might be for current year 2025. But it would be just technical things like that. And I also think it might be helpful to put before each entry, including the county administrator's overall first piece, which would be the executive summary, an organization chart, so that we could see what the entity looked like in visual form. And it could be pretty general in most cases, but just a quick org chart. So those are the things that I can get with the administrator about and see if those are easily done, or we want to try some other variation of it, but those will be the details of it.
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Long.
Yeah, I really like the idea. The first three things probably could be combined. I think that it seems as I've read through some of these responsibilities and program summary, seems to be a lot of repetition. So I think it could be combined and a lot more succinct. So I would agree with that point in particular.
I just want to add, Supervisor Fiedler, thank you for that input. And I appreciate you obliging me on that, because that was excellent. I do have a few things also I'd like to see, and I know Administrator Witt and I have talked about this, but I think with employment the way it is, not only here in this county, but all over the United States, and being the projected labor shortages that we're going to have, I think it's important that we also have a look into vacancy rates for positions, turnover percentages, things like that from department to department. Help us just see how things are, especially when it comes to allocating tax dollars. That's very important, not only in the public sector, but in the private sector. That's looked at all the time as well. So, and then also how it's weighted state required services where, you know, what's weighted into each of these departments and how is that delivered, and what's the impact on the taxpayers, not only from a financial point, but actually from a service point as well. So just things like that I think we could add in there that help us as a board take a look at things overall. So, yeah, no, thank you to everyone. Is there any other feedback, Supervisor Shirley?
I like everything that everybody's said so far. The only couple other things, at the end, we have the goals and objectives for the current year. I'd like to see a look out for the next budget cycle. What are we gonna need looking forward, not only position-wise, but equipment, challenges for what we have coming down the pipeline, whatever it is. And also on the employee count, I'd be interested to see, especially some of our positions that aren't getting filled, like how many days are those positions opened and what the department head thinks that their opinion on why that position is open as long as it is, or why are we having issues filling it?
Any other feedback? Any other opinions? I mean, I know there's a lot of opinions on this front row here, but is there any other feedback or opinions on this report? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all very much for taking that on, and thank you, Administrator Witt and team, for putting that together, and all the department heads for your annual reports. We appreciate it. I just know that there are probably some supervisors that are newer, or there's one in particular that's newer. It just helps. You know, my first 2 years on the board reading those reports, you're like, where are these going sometimes? And so knowing this format and having this out here, I think also our committee, we should have this where at the first committee of the whole of every year, this is, or even our first board meeting, be it April or whatever, of each year, every 2 years, that this is like really pronounced to the board members. So anyway, thank you all for that. Hearing no other comments, opinions, suggestions, we're gonna move on to requests for future agenda items. Are there any requests for future agenda items? Any requests for future agenda items? Okay, seeing none, we will go to announcements. Are there any announcements? Any announcements? Anything fun and exciting? Any announcements? Okay, hearing none, we are going to set the date of the next meeting for February 18th at 2025. And be it that all business items have been satisfied, I consider us adjourned at 6:02 p.m. Thank you.